Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to act as the moderator for our next panel. With me today is a group of phenomenal individuals, all of whom are advocates for autism. And they are going to be, how we're going to have this afternoon or this panel work is that we are going to have each of these wonderful people introduce themselves, share some of their thoughts and experiences, and then we actually want to open it up to the room so that you can ask some of our autistic self-advocates any questions that you may have based on their presentations. What we're going to do, as in the past, is actually have you write the questions on the cards. Someone will collect them and bring them up here, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. So in leading up to this event, we all worked together and really tried to come up with the best theme for this panel discussion. We debated whether we should have different topics discussed or just one issue. But overall, what kind of we kept coming back to was, especially in light of a lot of the members of this panel were on the Canadian Autism Partnership project team. And we spoke about the Unspoken price of advocacy, the toll that it takes in advocating for themselves individually every day of their lives, but as well as collectively advocating as a larger group for the needs of all Canadians. So without further ado, I am going to start off by introducing my friend Trudy, and she's going to kick it off. So the AV team knows. Trudy's going to give a signal for when she wants the slide to go up for her presentation. So I'll give you a thumbs up. Okay, we're good.
Okay, thanks, Allie. Just a word of warning to all of you. There are some things in this talk that will be difficult for you to listen to. I'm going to be blunt about some things that are not comfortable. So let's start this off with a question. How many of you have driven with kids in the car? Okay, so most of you will be able to picture this fairly well. I want you to imagine the scenario for a bit. You're driving the car down a main street, meaning lots of traffic and traffic lights. It's snowing semi-heavily, but not enough to declare a snow day. Enough, but sort of enough that visibility is actually limited. And you have children in the back seat, children who, as children are wont to do, are yelling, "Mommy, Mommy, she's hitting me. Daddy, Daddy, he won't stop poking me." Constantly, without stopping, loudly. For a lot of autistics, that intensity of stimulus is happening to us all the time, all day, every day. Maybe there are good days where it's like it isn't snowing, and then there are bad days when you're stuck in the house because of a snowstorm, and you're trying to handle meals, and the children are going insane from being stuck inside, and they're yelling every 10 minutes, and you just can't get the break. You've heard examples like this before, I'm sure. If you haven't, you definitely should have. This is the kind of sensory stimulation that we live with all the time, day in, day out. The kind where sometimes you just have to hit something to try to control the input, or because you have a sense that isn't producing the same intensity of input, and so it's as though that sensory mode does not exist. And then you put us in a room full of people, some of whom listen. We do have people who listen to us, but others of whom inform us that we're broken. We're not real people. But, we can talk or type, so we're not really autistic either. So no, we really have no idea what their child is like, and it's an insult that we point out that there are some elements of autism that can be positive, that can be strengths. But of course, even if we're not real autistics, we're still broken. We don't move like them. We don't talk like them if we can talk. We don't react like them. We don't make eye contact. We're emotionless machines. We have no empathy. We fidget rather than focusing all our attention on whoever's speaking, and so on and so on. Now imagine what it would be like if you were constantly being told that, all the time. Told that your neurology is a disease. Trust me, there are a number of articles about the horrors of neurotypical syndrome in floating around the autistic community. That they know all about you, and anything you say contrary to what they believe is a lie. It's obviously a lie. That if you're playing with your hair or tapping your fingers while someone is talking, you're not listening. That you have to do things that physically hurt you, because that's how real people interact. That parents killing their children who are just like you were at their age should be viewed with compassion. That they had such trials, and it was better for their child, who is just like you were, to die, because they obviously would have no quality of life. How would you feel? As Patricia so often reminds people, one of the strengths of the autistic neurotype is pattern recognition. We're autistic. If people don't object to autistics being killed because they are autistic and difficult to handle, what do you think we conclude about what people would think if we were killed? I'm lucky. My blog doesn't get the sort of flame wars that happen on the blogs of more well-known, mostly US, autistic advocates. I only really started being a full advocate with CAP just over 2 years ago. And I tend to read Twitter very carefully, mostly just looking at my notifications in order to avoid some of the, honestly speaking, absolute filth that gets shoved at autistics on that platform. So I haven't really experienced burning out of advocacy at this point. But I have what I call a blog circle, a number of whom haven't posted in over a year, and a number of those that have stopped because of advocacy burnout. So what is one of the major prices of advocacy for autistics? Burnout. Being so wrung out from constantly having to defend ourselves, our lives, and our neurology to people who aren't willing to listen, or who, even worse, tell us that we're wrong, that we don't know what we're talking about, that they are the experts, and we should just shut up and get out of the way because we're broken, and we're also not real autistics. And the consequences of burnout can be extreme, all the way up to suicide. If I can have the first slide, please. So I've got 3 websites to show you, just in conclusion. This is the But You Don't Look Sick website, a site about invisible disabilities, mostly physical, but mental health issues and neurodiverse conditions fall under that umbrella as well. It was written and put up by the woman who created Spoon's theory, if you've ever heard of that. And as Patricia's going to mention, it echoes, but you don't look autistic. Next slide, please. Thinking Person's Guide to Autism. This is an excellent resource site. Most of their articles are written by autistics. Next slide. And last but hardly least, We Are Like Your Child. I know of autistic advocates who as children were nonverbal, had violent meltdowns, had toilet training issues, all of that. And autism is a delay. It's not a developmental stop. So yes, we are like your child. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy. We're now going to hear from Corey Walker.
I just noticed that when Trudy speaks, there's a bit of an echo. Is that supposed to be the way?
I found that yesterday too, so I think so, yes.
Okay, fair enough. So, like Trudy, I am autistic, and that means I speak the truth. I guess like the court says, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. I don't pussyfoot around. I don't like putting sugar with cherries on top. So I do have some hard truths, and some of you may love it. Some of you may want to string me up afterwards, and we'll just see how it goes, I guess. I was asked to speak on the unspoken price of advocacy. That's a difficult topic, and I really had to think about what I would say on that. The problem is, as always, I leave things to the last minute, so I was working on this earlier today. The problem is I was very worked up while writing this presentation because I've had a very frustrating morning. My income tax refund has not come in yet. I swear CRA is sleeping. I continue to have difficulties with just trying to get my flight sorted out for tomorrow. Dealing with Air Canada is not a pleasant experience. And earlier, my laptop insisted on changing my keyboard to Canadian French, which for some reason turns the apostrophe into some weird symbol. As I take about 1 million deep breaths, at a minimum, I start to think about what advocacy means to me and what it has and continues to cost me. I can't remember when I started advocating for myself. I guess I did a bit of self-advocating in upper elementary school years, as well as in high school and post-secondary. In fact, I really think it's only in the last several years I've noticed myself becoming more powerful in, and therefore more recognized for, my self-advocacy work. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in 2001 by a neuropsychiatrist at UBC in Vancouver. I was 22 or 23, depending on whether it was my appointment in the spring or the fall, because my birthday was in October. I can't remember which appointment I was diagnosed at. I didn't even know what Asperger's syndrome was at the time, so my mom and I took to the web to research it. It turned out it was a form of autism, and my mom was not surprised, as they were told when I was young that I had all the signs of autism except that I could talk. That was back in 1985. Needless to say, things have changed a lot since then. It took me a while before I started mentioning the autism diagnosis to people. In fact, at first, I really didn't pay much attention. I was focused on what I thought were my main challenges of ADHD, OCD, and Tourette's syndrome. However, in time, I became more aware that many of my challenges in life were caused more by my autism than by my other disabilities. Let me scroll down here. Okay, here we go. It was at that point that I started speaking out more about autism and the need for better supports and services. This became especially so when I was hired by Autism BC in December 2012 as a Northern Regional Coordinator, a position I continue to hold. Advocacy is very hard work. It drains me both mentally and physically. While I relish the many people who compliment me on my inspirational speaking, I have also experienced personal attacks from people who don't like what I'm advocating. Last year, just a few weeks after the 2017 summit ended, Autism Canada sent an email to everyone on the ASD Advisory Committee that I was a part of, calling for an outright rejection of the Canadian Autism Partnership, an initiative that many of us at this table were a key part of researching, discussing, and developing. I participate in a Facebook group that is exclusive for Canadian adults on the spectrum. At the same time, there's a lot of discussion on the group about CAP. I was happy to answer people's questions about the project and the business plan as best I could, even sharing a link to the business plan once it was released to the public. I was criticized by one member of the group because our group, the CAP group, contained only white people, and because our plan didn't propose special programs for autistics who are HIV positive or visible minorities. Now, I wasn't involved in choosing the members of the CAP Self-Advocate Advisory Committee, but the lady who chose us did so because of our strong self-advocacy in our local communities and regions. And no, CAP didn't include things specific for people who are HIV positive, because while there are autistics who suffer from HIV, there are also many programs already out there for people fighting that terrible disease. Also, the Canadian Autism Partnership was designed to provide services to all Canadians, regardless of ethnicity, and from the cradle to the grave. We are trying to be inclusive and not single particular groups out. Also, last time I checked, autistics were minorities on their own, as we're only 1.5% of the population. The person called me racist, among other things, in this public Facebook group, and even posted a comment I made in my own defense on his own Facebook page, thinking I couldn't see it, but I could. He'd done so in a way that was out of context and made me look like a racist. I'm not. I had to report this person, who, by the way, like me, was one of the admins of this autism Facebook group. I had to report him to the group owner. He is removed from the group with one of his comments deleted. Never before have I had to save screenshots of a Facebook page in case I need to take any further action to protect my reputation. Luckily, I never went that far. The heat eventually simmered and tempers cooled. However, I still remember that, and since this day, I have minimized my involvement with that group as I fear being further attacked. I have autism. I get stressed easily. I often suffer from anxiety. When I get anxious and upset, I get wound up in little knots, not literally, and it can take me days to cool down and relax again. I'm also very passionate about what I believe in, and I support my fellow self-advocates' passions as well. That means when one of them is anxious or upset, I feel it too. It's as if we were twins, even though we're not related. I will spend hours of my day when I'm upset walking in circles, fuming to the walls of an empty room. This spring, the federal government announced the AID program, a $20 million program to invest in research and support for families affected by autism. This number is surprisingly close to the $19 million proposed as part of the Canadian Autism Partnership, which would have seen over $3 million in federal funding invested in autism research and services each year over a multi-year period for Phase 1. One of the biggest differences is that CAP was a partnership with different organizations, whereas this new program doesn't appear to be a partnership, but is mostly under one organization. This new program also appears to mostly focus on families instead of everybody. It also lacks a self-advocate's voice and lacks extensive extensive consultation that CAP did with in every province and territory. I know my time is up. I'll be quick. I can't tell you how betrayed I feel by the federal government. The former federal health minister was supposed to meet with our group personally to thank us for our hard work and contribution, and she never did. She was the one who suggested meeting with us, but was never willing to make time in her schedule to make it happen. The biggest root of this problem is Canada's partisan political system. Now, I'm going to admit that I'm a left-winger when it comes to the political spectrum. I don't vote Conservative, and I don't usually vote Liberal. Sorry, Mike. But I do vote. However, in this case, the Conservatives, NDP, and Green Party all unanimously supported our proposal. In fact, it was under the former Conservative government that CASDA was given the funding to do the consultation and build the business plan in the first place. But our current government didn't want to be caught supporting an idea that they couldn't take credit for, so they reject it, and the following year come up with their own plan, not based on any public consultation, and lacks the voices of self-advocates. I notice that the federal cabinet ministers are not here for the whole summit, choosing, I apologize for this, but I'm going to put it anyways, choosing to act like children in question period instead of being here to support us and, more importantly, learn from us. I'll skip the next part. Except to say that, it's difficult for me because my employer supports the government's current program, and so I've got that situation being in between a rock and a hard place, which I don't like. In conclusion, being a self-advocate is a wonderful role and provides me with fulfilling, life-changing experiences that I feel enrich me. Yet at the same time, there is that unspoken price, the stress we deal with in our everyday lives, when sometimes your advocacy doesn't accomplish what you're hoping for, or worse yet, makes you enemies that attack and bully you. So the next time you're speaking to a self-advocate and they look distracted, tired, or ready to throw something or someone out the nearest window, be kind and patient to us. You may not fully realize the price we sometimes pay as a self-advocate. Thank you for listening. I apologize for going over time. This is my heartfelt expression of pain and joy. Thank you for coming. If I haven't met you yet, I'll be up my poster in a little bit after this thing is done for a short time. After that, Patricia and I are going to visit the War Museum. If you share a love for history, come and join us. Thank you. I never could keep on time.
Totally fine. There'll be a support group for Senator Munson and Mike Lake in the back after the panel concludes. We'll now turn to Patricia.
That was wonderful, Corey. Thank you. Okay. Corey, Trudy, and I ran our talks by each other in the green room a bit ago, and I'm grateful we did because there was a lot of crying and emotion involved, and I kind of want to get through this without breaking down like I usually do. I'm trying not to have my Sally Field moment. All right, so this talk is going to be dedicated to Stephanie Elizabeth Plotkin and the number 5. My name is Patricia George Zwicker, and I am editor of Autistics Aloud, a growing grassroots magazine published by Autism Nova Scotia. I'm a very creative person, though possibly really a chinchilla in disguise, a disability rights advocate, and I have a confession to make here today during this panel on the unspoken price of advocacy from a first person's perspective. Change the slide, please. I'm full of ick, as it goes. I'm dyslexic, I'm dyspraxic, I'm epileptic, and I'm autistic. But you don't look autistic, Patricia. Did that unexplained pause make you feel uncomfortable? Maybe confused? Sit with that feeling, if it did. It's important that you do. 5 words. But you don't look autistic. Those words never lose their impact or their sting. They never not cut coming and going, a double-edged sword, if you will. No matter how many times I script for a witty answer or even to create a teachable moment, it still takes me off guard. It uncovers a seed that has only had 6 years to grow and is still establishing its roots while stretching towards the sun. You're not like my child. 5 words that punch holes in the souls of many autistic adults. You may not hear it, but we hear it in each other, the low hiss of air leaking until we feel completely deflated. So we do our best to patch each other's holes and lift each other back up, hoping that when our own balloon deflates, our community will be there to patch our leaks in return. Change slide, please. I've come to start calling it autistic oxygen. This is for many reasons, and some of them are deeply personal. I came to start my journey on this road to my autistic identity and advocating when I started having seizures just over 6 years ago in late 2011. Then early 2012, something happened to me that many, including myself, find hard to comprehend. I seized for 50 minutes. You don't breathe when you're seizing. Your brain becomes robbed of precious oxygen. To minimize the effects of that, oxygen is hand-pumped into you in hopes of saving your brain. When nothing else worked, I was placed in a coma, and while in the coma, I flatlined, and I was resuscitated. For me, this has not been limited to a medical experience only. All that seizing and dying in oxygen, I was transforming into who I was born being, autistic. You should know that identity-first language is pure joy for many. It's like taking off the itchiest clothes you've ever had to wear and feeling fur as soft as my chinchilla surrounding you. The words epilepsy and autism arrived the same week, which was 43 years into my life. It would be the last time I would have to crash and burn without knowing what was really happening to me. The lifelong cycle that chewed me up and spit me out over and over again, making me feel more and more wrong each time, making me feel sicker in every aspect and affecting every relationship. But now here I was given a thunderbolt with a life ring. I think I just came up with my idea for my first tattoo. We've heard a lot about numbers over the last few days. I like numbers a lot. They let us see inside situations and they give us a chance for perspective change. I have a number that I believe will change your perspective about some things. 54. That's my life expectancy as an autistic adult. I turned 49 last month. 5 more years. I can only speak for myself when it comes to why, when faced with such numbers, I've chosen this path of advocacy. Why, when faced with such limited time and resources, do I spend a significant amount of it advocating? I don't have a choice, actually. There's not really a way for me to sit back and do nothing. I don't know how to do that, and so by my very nature, I've signed up for a very wrought path that once had me singled out on Twitter by William Shatner. Yes, Captain James T. Kirk, and I was bullied by thousands. That happened when I was here last year. As I was literally standing on the steps of Parliament for Autism on the Hill, I discovered he had locked me out of my Twitter account. Someone I looked up to my entire life took me down because they could, because I dared to advocate, and because I asked him to reconsider lighting it up blue. Then to come here and to feel as though I had to beg for cap when there were far too many egos and attitudes standing in the way. A time's-up shift needs to happen on the Canadian autism professional landscape. We know way more about what's going on behind the scenes than you think we do. I will be brutally honest with you. That all broke me. Part of the reason I've come back here this year is because I need to find a way to heal from all that happened. I needed to let you know that I am not, can't, and won't be a token ever again. Don't ever tokenize any of us ever again. Please go to the last slide. You'll have to skip to. I was asked to consider what my call to action to you all would be. Wow. To try and take the thoughts and feelings and emotions of what it means to take on a role as an advocate and to make it succinct and yet emotional enough to reach through the bits and pieces that separate us. So I picked up Autistics Aloud and I flipped through it for inspiration, and the words, they came. 5 words. They are the remedy to you do not look autistic, to you're not like my child. Nothing about us without us. Oh, my medications just came up. How ironic is that? They saved my life. That's my call to action. It's not complicated, it's right, and it will save lives. You've taken an important step to doing that with a summit, but you're skimming the surface. You have to go so much deeper, as deep as we have to go to survive life on a planet with other humans that see us as less than, who want to medicalize us, cure us, fix us, compare us to cancer. Don't ever compare autism to cancer again. Walk out of this room and make a pact to yourself that you will never, ever compare autism to cancer again. We've reached the limit of that, and we will not tolerate it any longer. You need to feel that discomfort. You need to feel the weight. You need to let you wiggle in your seat, and you need to be afraid of being called out for being different than those around you. or that poke at your privilege to call yourselves professionals over the lives of other human beings who are so often sitting right in front of you. You've noticed that one of our panelists, Bruno, is not here. That is because the unspoken price today was far too high. Earlier this week, Bruno's best friend took her life. She was just 35. So now we must rally around Bruno. We must fill his balloon with autistic oxygen and somehow soften this blow so that we don't lose him too. The unspoken price of advocacy is being spoken. I desperately hope that you're listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Patricia. Wow. Jackie, if you're able to, we'd love to hear from you now.
It's on now. Good.
You're good.
Yes. And the most common autistic experience is the brush off. Disrespect, devaluing, dismissal. To recognize the depth and pervasiveness of our physical pain would require changes that most people aren't willing to make. To give our emotional pain credit would question efficiencies, which allow people to get things done quickly by externalizing costs. Even for those of us, or even for those with the patience to listen to our thoughts past our delayed responses, our verbal tics, and our frequently atonal delivery, there is so little to invest in positive change. Repeated trauma is like repeatedly tearing a scab off. The wound gets deeper, it weeps more fluids, and it scars worse. As wounds deepen, it gets harder to do things that might tear that scab off again. The brush off is an autistic's deepest area of wounding. Emotional wounds leave worse scars than physical trauma. Take a moment and just think, who was the first friend by whom you felt betrayed? Does their face pop up? When were you most recently drained by others' failure to listen? Maybe a meeting you participated in? Can you picture that event? I bet it was recent. Now consider physical pain. Have you ever bruised or broken a bone or fallen hard? Can you recall that pain? What about giving birth? Have you ever heard a mother say, "I forgot how much it hurt"? Humans are hardwired to forget physical pain as soon as it goes away, but to never forget emotional pain. Evolutionarily, emotional pain is the stick that makes us name our carrot, our ideal alternative. As long as emotional pain is not so deep it cripples us, it's what motivates us. It's what we will not stop trying to change. Autism highlights how far humanity has diverged from caring, compassionate, and constructive interactions with all that is. It's the purpose of autism advocacy to see caring, compassionate, and constructive interactions return. As quantum physics reminds us, we are not separate. When others are harmed, so are we, whether we recognize it or not. For us literal-minded autistics, hope can be intoxicating. CS, CASDA gave many of us our first opportunity to feel heard, respected, and valued on an organizational and national level. For CASDA to then be disrespected, devalued, and dismissed by federal politics was crushing. Crushed hope costs less when there's little hope to begin with. The bigger the hope, the harder the fall. I've been through the cycle of crushed hope often enough that when CASDA asked for spectrum adult representation, I expected another opportunity to not be listened to. I've been in this since the 90s. I'm going to be 53 this year, and I got my first diagnosis when I was 23. I hit the medical journals. I hit everything I could find, online and off, written by adults in the spectrum. And you know where I found the truth? I found the truth in the adults within the spectrum, because what was in the medical journals didn't reflect autism at all. And that was weird, because I'd been reading medical journals since grade 11, digging for the symptoms that I experienced on a daily basis and where they might be coming from and why the things in my life were helping me or harming me. I'm ashamed to say that at first I did not extend CASDA the respect that all of you deserved. I was so accustomed to being disrespected, devalued, and dismissed that I assumed it, and I failed to give you my best. But you won me over. How powerfully you shifted my world when you listened. You changed your reporting to reflect our concerns. You adapted your processes to better include us. You continue to ask questions and make adaptations as we collectively fumble our way towards better collaboration. Prior to the CASDA experience, I was living the cost of autism advocacy. After almost 30 years of scarring from disrespect, devaluing, and dismissal, it was so hard to find the energy and words to even show up for political opportunities to make a positive impact. Because of the CAP process, I was able to see that crushing federal brush-off as a temporary setback of treacherous mud or scree on that trek up the mountain. I could see it that way because instead of being an unheard voice in the wilderness, I knew that there was cross-Canada, cross-sectoral support for necessary change. And I knew that because of you. I knew that because the members of CASDA, you restored my hope.
Thank you, Jackie. Daniel, we look forward to hearing from you as well. Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, you know what? I mean, my colleagues have all hit all the nails on the head. I mean, I spoke yesterday at the other panel about the critical suicide rates, and we've just had a stark example with one of our own colleagues. So I don't feel I need to talk more about that, but this is incredible. I get to share my experience of being an autistic advocate. I didn't know that my experience was actually a thing, or enough of a thing to devote a whole panel to it, so that's cool. So, advocacy, I like it. I like doing it. I like public speaking. I like social justice. Yeah, I'm one of those guys. And also, I have to do it. I feel a responsibility because ignorance of autism is staggering. And if we let only non-autistic people describe our experiences, well, that makes no sense, and it's going to continue to cost our lives. So I advocate to change understanding, and I'm grateful to be heard, but I'll let you in on a secret. Sometimes I think I can't do this anymore. And then I don't do it for a while. And that's for a couple of reasons. Well, first of all, and maybe a slight trigger warning here, the infighting in our community over hot button topics, and I'm not taking a side on any of these things, but bear with me. Things like ABA or person first language or functioning labels or research that's supposedly going to cure us, all that kind of thing. All the anger and hate around these issues really startles me. I have my own positions on those, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but my autism means that I have difficulty navigating conflict. So when people get verbally aggressive, it makes me anxious about saying or doing the wrong thing. So I don't want to put myself out there. And don't misunderstand. We need all opinions at the table. We need to hash these things out. But please keep sight of the fact that we are all working toward a better future for autistic people. Second, well, there's been a lot of stories of inappropriate treatment of autistic students who, again, have been driven to self-harm, and adults as well. And that's because of a failure of our schools and institutions to help people in the way that they need. These stories horrify me and make me feel like I'm failing as an advocate. And though I know it's not all on me, my looping brain, I have autism, I have trouble letting things go. It can make these things seem impossible, so I pull back. I try to avoid that burnout. I do that by I take care of my physical health and try and take care of my mental health by focusing on simple things that can get really damn complicated for me when I'm in that state of mind, like sleeping, eating well, finding ways to calm my thoughts. When I can do those things, my threshold for stress is higher. So I guess my secret weapon, if there is one, is mindfulness, which helps me to keep the jerk inside my head quiet. If he's on pause, then I can do my advocacy. I'm always asking him to kind of zip it. So that's my self-care, how I keep myself in mental form to be an autistic advocate. But I'm going to need your help so I can keep doing this work. If you learn something useful from one of my speaking events or one of my colleagues, if we say something that makes you go mind blown because it sheds so much light on your understanding, I encourage you to share that nugget as far as you can. In conversations, on social media, everywhere. And more importantly, another thing to remember is that my autism, all it is a way that I process information in my brain. But people let that define me sometimes. These are important aspects of me, but I'm also a movie lover, a writer, an uncle, an animal lover who greatly loves giving belly scratches to his chihuahua. I love the gifts of my autism, but I also fear being dismissed, rejected, misunderstood, as someone else said, treated like I'm broken because I have autism, because I have been treated that way. And to the professionals and leaders in this room, I do ask if you want to know how you can help autistic self-advocates. Well, for one thing, I work really hard at this. And I did 7 years at post-secondary studying various things related to communications and autism, honing my communications. And so I think that people like us who take that time should be respected. So if you're putting on events like this, and if you sign up autistic presenters as part of your event, please try to compensate them the way you would any professional speaker, because no one knows more about autism than we do. And if you're making changes that will impact our lives or are staging autism-related events intended to educate, please consider a minimum of equal autistic representation in your speakers and panels and at every level. Because Earlier today, somebody asked how many self-advocates were in attendance today, and it was a small fraction of the actual people in attendance here. So I think that's very, very important. Now, though advocacy can take a toll, that cost is nothing compared to the suffering that results from a lifetime of being excluded by the majority. And by spreading the meaning that you find in our messages and allowing us to guide the conversations that are about us, you'll be motivating at least one autistic self-advocate to continue doing what they're doing. Thank you.
So I know that everyone up here, with the time that we have left, would really love to engage, hear any feedback you have, or answer any questions. So if you wanted to jot something down on a card in front of you, I know people would be happy to bring them up. I just want to say, before we get to that, I've spent with a number of you, the past couple years in different cities, getting to know you, and your camaraderie is something to be envied, truly. And people say that I'm the parent of a child on the autism spectrum, and one of the misconceptions, the greatest one I think, is that there's a lack of empathy amongst autistic individuals. Well, I can tell you that it's not the case. You guys are phenomenal. From Patricia, if I could share a quick story. My son, who is just beginning to understand autism, was selected to raise the flag with the mayor of Halifax last year, and Patricia was heading on the train actually to advocate for something else, and the night before she said, it's really important, I'm not going to be there for Hugh, but I want to deliver something for him. So Hugh woke up that morning, he was a little bit nervous, and on his table where he eats breakfast, there was a Batman stuffy, because superheroes are his favorite thing, and the most beautifully written card as to encourage him as he set off in his own path of advocacy. So I just want you to know, Daniel, I'm sorry guys, Daniel, you shared about how important it is for all of us to listen to you and to take that information and share those nuggets. And I just want you to know that we're listening, and you have changed my life as a parent of a child on the spectrum, and you've changed the lives today of everybody in this room with your words. Thank you. Group hug.
And who said people with autism don't have emotions?
We have no empathy.
This after I was complaining about you and your flight, Corey.
What's that?
I said this after I was complaining to you about your flight nuisance. Now I feel bad. So I'm going to, I'm not sure how much time we have left. Amy, maybe you can just give me a clue when you have a moment. 10 minutes? Okay. And I'm sure that these guys would be more than happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer after any that you might have. So first question is, where would you recommend when someone living with autism, where they would begin their journey as a self-advocate? Do you have any lessons learned or tips to share? So I might just get each of you to take maybe 30 seconds, if you can, because I want to get all of you to.
Well, for me, I basically started it by reading the blogs of other autistic adults online, and that was what inspired me to become an advocate. I saw how much they helped me figure things out, and so I decided to pay it forward and started my own blog. So yeah, I definitely say at least one of the places to start is reading the blogs of other autistic adults, because that will give information to help you deal with the issues that autism causes you, and also things that have been done by other autistic advocates and how people react, and knowing what sort of are the major issues in the autistic community, the things that we really need to look at.
Well, I guess just a couple quick things. Trudy mentioned some good ones. If you want to help some, maybe have a mentor. I didn't really have one myself, but it maybe would have helped. I could have maybe have avoided some of the pitfalls. I actually don't. I didn't do it today, but I do have a presentation about called "My Blueprint, My Successful Blueprint of Life with Autism," and then I do talk about some do's and don'ts. But I think having, meeting someone with autism, or even if they don't have autism, meeting as another self-advocate who's respected, I think is very helpful, because they can maybe give you some tips on what they found worked for them. Although it doesn't mean that will work for you. At the end of the day, too, what you got to do is think about what you want to say. Think about what matters to you, what you care for, what you want to advocate for, and then just start speaking from your heart and sharing your passion. Because if people have any emotions in them at all, if you're speaking from your heart and what you're passionate about, they can't help but be affected. And if they aren't affected, then I guess I feel sorry for them.
Corey, would you be willing to share that presentation? Maybe we could share it through the CASDA website or Facebook?
I would love to do that.
Okay, great.
So my advice would be use your pattern recognition skills if you have them, and a lot of us do. Take time. Do not plunge like I did head first into this like a wrecking ball, Miley Cyrus, and I came. And so, and so I had to spend a lot of time going backwards too. But the journey of advocacy is very much like a journey through your life. So you begin off, and these are your baby years, and they're going to be rough, and then you're going to move into your teen years, and they're going to be terrible. But you're going to grow through them, and you're going to gain those experiences, and then you're going to grow into a more mature advocate. So take time, use your pattern recognition skills, and find respected members of the autistic community. Like Trudy said, find out what the major topics are, the things that can end up getting you swarmed online if you're going to jump into that role, because it can be very quick, very immediate, very traumatizing. You need to have a plan for self-care before you ever start advocating, and you need to understand what self-care is, and learn ways to do that, knowing when to walk away, understanding, it's very hard for us to let go of things. We so greatly want to write them, so greatly want to make it fair. It just, I really am just peace, love, and happiness at the core of me. I really just wish we could all be that way. So the fall from hope, because hope is a big thing for us. So, realize that you're going to have to maybe temper some of that. You're going to have big setbacks, but it's going to be a great and enriching learning experience, and that you have a community who is waiting for you and can't wait to embrace you.
Jackie, Daniel, do you want to add to that?
Try again. There we go. This is more advice for the community that's wanting to support autistics. I would love to see books written by autistics in every school and public library, because most communities, no matter how isolated, no matter how rural, have a school, have a community center, have at least a small library shared. And when you read books by an adult or a teen, as in the case of The Reason I Jump, when you read a book written by an autistic, you get a window into a life that actually reflects you. And all of a sudden, you don't feel like the sore thumb to the same degree. You recognize that there are other people out there who are like you in a way you've never seen reflected before, and that there are values to this way of being. There are gifts that come with the challenges. Those gifts are huge, but they're often buried by the health, the communication, the other challenges that get in the way of those gifts being fully expressed. Please, make books available, because even where you don't have internet, if there's a book written by someone like Donna Williams or John Elder Robeson or I'm going to get his name wrong, but it's Hidoki something, Naoki something. But he, when you read those books, you see yourself and you see autism differently. When we read those books, it's a sigh of relief. It's okay. I'm not alone. There are other people like me.
Well, I guess what I would add to that is I'll give you the quick Coles Notes version of how I got into it. So I'm going to say, and I think this is probably the first time I publicly said this, when I was diagnosed at age 10, I did not want the diagnosis. I was not okay with it. I was very self-conscious. I've put that behind me, but it was difficult to get me, for the people in my life to get me to accept sort of who I was. And over time, by the time I was around 14, my mom eventually had the idea of me talking to my high school teachers about it, just giving a little bit of a presentation to them on how they could best serve me. And that was a hit. So eventually we started growing it a little bit. I started talking to principals and board members, all that kind of thing. It started growing organically from there. So I would say just start somewhere. Start talking to people, even if it's just two people in a room that you might be able to educate, or you might be able to learn a little bit more about, or you might be able to teach them rather. Just start somewhere. Start telling them even things about you that you think are dumb or not important, because there are things that people just don't understand. Start from there. Work your way up. Go to your schools, your agencies, all of these places that are meant to help people with autism and everyone else, and just keep hammering away, because we can do great things that way.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay, so we're going to be really quick with this. And there's a number of other ones. There's actually one question on ABA, but I think that maybe what we'll do, we said that we would follow up through the CASDA Facebook page and answer some of these questions once we gave the team some time to really contemplate and think on it. So I think that might be one that we would want to digest and get back to people about. So if we can't answer here, we'll make sure that everyone's views gets put up on the CASDA Facebook page. The last one I think is great, and it's one I'm interested in too, is I have a 9-year-old son who is nonverbal. How can I most respectfully be his voice? Who would like to take this on?
I'll start on.
Trudy?
Well, one of the first things I would advise is he able to type or point to pictures, anything like that? The alternative communication, AAC. And I would ask what his opinions are. What does he want people to know? Mm-hmm. What does he feel he needs help with? Whether it's advocating at school or whether it's something in his environment that needs change or whatever. I would ask if there is a method of communication that he can use. That's what I advise as one of the first steps, is see if there's another method of communication he can use and ask him what he needs.
Jackie? Oh, sorry, to get Jackie and then Corey.
First thing, animals are much better at expressing love than humans are. And those of us who've had any time to spend around animals, it doesn't matter if it's an animal that lives in the home. It can be birds who live outside your window. But that connection with other living things is often a pathway to deeper understanding, deeper expression. So that's kind of the first thing that I would really recommend, is see if you can connect with other life around you. The next thing that I would recommend, and love, do it in a loving way. The next thing that I would recommend is, if you have access to the internet, and if you're willing to dig into the annals of YouTube, there is an autistic woman named Amanda Baggs, who is nonverbal and what most people would consider non-engaged. She does YouTube videos that explain her experience of life and that I think would really help a lot of people. I have a lot more in common with Amanda Baggs than I do with most people in this room. Even though I can speak, even though I can show up. So for those who can't speak, Amanda Baggs is a great place to start.
Yeah, I'll just sort of second what Trudy and Jackie said. There are, everybody has a voice. They may not have it in the way you and I have it, they may not have a voice the way I'm using mine right now. But there's always, especially in this day and age, and we're blessed in Canada to a degree in that we have maybe not enough resources available, but maybe more than what many other people in other parts of the world have. So use something like PEX or there's Proloquo. There's different both analog and digital kind of technologies out there that will help your son express their voice, because it's very important that you do find their voice and let them express their own needs in their own way, as opposed to just guessing and end up being like so many others where you're speaking for the autistic person instead of the person speaking for themselves.
Patricia, no one wants to.
Always respect autonomy. Always, 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 always respect autonomy. Non-speaking, speaking is one form of thousands of ways to communicate. So being non-speaking doesn't mean that you're non-communicating. You're communicating in some way all the time. It's kind of ironic, I have difficulty reading non-autistic people's body language, but non-autistic people have difficulty reading my body language. It's a deficit for me, it's not a deficit for you. Right? Did you ever think about it that way? Right? Anyway, so always respect autonomy and find a way to just, tease out what that voice is and how they will present it, and to see, if they even want to. But I think kind of more what you're asking is, how do you come out into this world and you want to make sure that your child is getting the best they can get and what is going to happen to them and for the trajectory of their lives. And, just be very careful to not speak over them. It always has to be with them. And consent is consent. Yes is yes, no is no across the board for all of us. And if you can't say yes, then you're saying no. So if you can't get consent in some way, then you will have to wait until a time until you can get that. And you will have to, work within the parent realm and do what you can to kind of support autistic adult voices until your child can, and you can help your child find their own voice. But please always respect autonomy, and please do not always boil everything down to toileting issues. Please. Thank you.
Daniel, I'd like to give Daniel up to just John.
So I guess I don't have that much more to add, so much as I just want to say sort of an example that came up once when I was doing one of my workshops. So there was this man who was there he was about 45 years old. He was nonverbal, and he was there with his mother, who was probably in her 70s or so. And it seemed to me like he was not paying attention the entire time. He was just sort of looking at the toy truck that he brought with him and turning it over and things like that. And it seemed like he was totally disengaged. So at the end of the session, the two of them came up to me, and his mother held out a laminated sheet with the alphabet on it. And he started pointing at the letters, and she started saying what he was saying to me. And he said, "Thank you so much, Daniel, for telling people how we feel. We have so much in common. So people often assume just because someone can't talk that means they're not intelligent and not capable of understanding. That's not true at all. Now, I was, humble brag, when we did my IQ test when I was a kid, I tested in the 99.9th percentile. And this man probably would have been diagnosed below the first percentile because how can you test someone's communication skills and things like that when they don't communicate in a typical way? So that was a real eye-opener for me. Just because someone can't talk or might be considered low functioning, which I hate those words, low functioning, high functioning, that doesn't mean that they don't have anything to contribute. So it's just really important to keep that in mind.
Thank you again, Tolfi. I'm not going to cry this time thanking you. That was phenomenal and so many insights gained. Thank you for taking the time and having the courage to come up and share so much of yourselves. That does take a lot of courage, and I know everyone really appreciated it. Thank you for your questions, and I've kept them, and what I'll do is I'll share with the group, and we'll come up with answers, and we'll... Yes, I will do that. So I'll get the team to answer the questions, and we'll make sure that they are shared. Their answers are shared. I also wanted to let you know that I made a joke yesterday about how I ugly cried on national TV with Martha Ian. Well, now I've ugly cried on camera. Apparently, I forgot that was being recorded. This session is being recorded, which is great because it'll be wonderful to share with others. These insights are so incredibly important to the conversation we're having. So we'll make sure that we share that on our Facebook page and make sure we get it out to you so that you can share with your networks as well. To Daniel's point, that's something that is an action item that you can do is share those nuggets and share the insights. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to our panel.